very much, broadcast. Well, good afternoon. Welcome to the Senate Committee on Government Affairs. Thanks to everyone who is joining online. We appreciate your participation. Members, please remember to mute your microphone when you're not speaking. And will the Secretary please call the roll?
Vice Chair Orenshaw.
Present.
Senator Gokachia.
Here.
Senator Neal.
Here.
Senator Hansen.
Here.
Chair Don Darrell-Loop.
Here. Thank you very much. We have our members are present and we have a quorum. First, before we begin our presentations, I want to just briefly explain how the virtual meetings work. I know that each time we meet, we have some new attendees from out in our virtual world. So I'll quickly go through these. You know that our legislative building is currently closed, but many of you have responded and said how much you like being able to virtually attend meetings, which you would not have been able to do. So as in previous sessions, all committee-related information is available on NELIS, which is our Nevada Electronic Legislative Information System. There are 4 ways to engage. You can register to participate in a committee meeting through NELIS. You can submit written testimony. You can share your opinion via the legislature's opinion application on NELIS, and you can view committee meetings online through NELIS or on the legislature's YouTube channel. In the 2021 session, you'll testify on a bill or provide public comment for the meeting you'd like to participate in. Committee meetings are listed in several places, so if you're not sure when a committee meets or what time, you can find that on NELIS. Just to note that while meeting registration is required to participate, it does not guarantee you will be able to speak. Similar to previous sessions, testimony and public comment may be limited due to time constraints. When you're on the phone line, please pay attention to the bill being considered so that you can speak promptly and listen to the prompts provided by the broadcasting staff so that you know which keys to press to raise your hand and unmute yourself. And we ask that everyone submit their exhibits in an electronic format, and we will have a period of public comment at the end. And remember that we'll be limiting you to 2 minutes per speaker. Today, the committee has the opportunity to receive presentations from 2 very important entities involved in government affairs in our state. One, integral to local governance, the Nevada Association of Counties, and the other, the Office of the Labor Commissioner, Department of Business and Industry, a state executive branch agency. So it is my understanding that Dagny Stapleton, Executive Director of the Nevada Association of Counties, and Vincent Guthreau, Deputy Director, will be providing our first presentation. So please begin when you're ready, and thank you so much for joining us.
Hi there. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Great to see all of you virtually today. Thank you so much, Madam Chair, for the time on your agenda today. I am Dagny Stapleton, the Executive Director of NACO, the Nevada Association of Counties. And we've got a short presentation for you today about all the things that NACO does and a little bit about Nevada's counties and all that they do. So I will go ahead and share my screen now. And okay, hope you all can see that. All right, so NACO, as I said, is the Nevada Association of Counties. We are the statewide association for county government officials and staff. We are a nonpartisan organization, and our members are all 17 of Nevada's county governments. NACO was formed in 1924, and so we're proud of our almost 100 years of working to serve Nevada's counties, including representing them here at the legislature. And NACO is authorized pursuant to NRS 244120. Our board of directors is made up of at least one commissioner from each of Nevada's 17 counties, and on this slide you can see our current leadership. NACO's current president is Clark County Commissioner Marilyn Kirkpatrick. Commissioner Kirkpatrick followed Commissioner Jim French, who was NACO's 2020 Vice President, and he is our past president. Our president-elect is Commissioner Bob Lucy from Washoe County, and our vice president, who will be our president in 2022, is Commissioner Varlin Higby from Lincoln County. The NACO board also includes affiliate members representing the other county elected officials in the state, including county clerks, assessors, recorders, treasurers, DAs, and sheriffs. The NACO board is a diverse group, but works very well together, which is something that we're really proud of. I think the reason for this is because whether big or small, all counties are responsible for providing many of the same critical services to Nevadans, and that includes a broad range of services, some of which you all are familiar with, but I will go through with you today. And so those county elected representatives really have a lot in common, as well as a lot of common challenges in areas where they work together. I also want to mention NACO staff. Many of you know NACO's Deputy Director, Vincent Guthrow, who's online today. You will see him frequently in this committee, representing counties and sharing the county perspective on various bills. NACO also has a natural resources manager, Colby Prout, and our office manager, Amanda Evans. So we are small, only a staff of 4, but we try to do our very best to accomplish a whole lot for our members with those limited resources. We also, during this session, have an intern, David Longo, who's joined us, who you may interact with as well. So we're happy to have him on staff. And we work hard with that small group. This is NACO's mission to support counties in maximizing efficiency and fostering trust in county government. We also serve as a forum for cooperation and coordination amongst Nevada's counties. The NACO board meets once a month and really does function as a place where members and county commissioners from across the state can exchange information and work together on common issues and goals. Our board includes at least one county commissioner from each of Nevada's counties, as well as the representatives from the other affiliated county officials associations. NACO also provides education and resources for our members through an annual conference, providing workshops and panels throughout the year. And our website is also a good resource for our members, as well as anyone else interested in Nevada's counties. On there, we have links to each of the county's websites individually, along with publications related to counties, information about our meetings and conference, etc. NACO also provides advocacy on behalf of counties, both here during the legislative session and in the interim. As you all know, there are many state laws and policies that affect counties. In the 2019 session, we actually tracked almost half of the bills introduced as they affected us in one way or another. And NACO works also on federal issues that affect counties through our federal delegation and through the National Association of Counties, who are a strong voice for counties on Capitol Hill, and all of our 17 counties are a member of that organization as well. Finally, NACO also engages on a number of statutory and statewide committees with county and NACO representation. One important one is the Board of the Fund for Hospital Care to Indigent Persons, which NACO actually administers. Part of county's responsibilities for those in our communities is to help fund care for those defined as indigent, those who do not have the resources to pay for their own care. And so this board oversees county and other funds that assist with that. Some of the other statewide boards that we have membership on and where counties have an interest or representation include the Board on Indigent Defense Services that oversees public defenders, the Committee on Local Government Finance, the Nevada Commission on Nuclear Projects, the Commission on Off-Highway Vehicles, the State Land Use Planning Council, and the Cooperative Extension Advisory Council, as well as, of course, the Governor's COVID-19 Task Force. So just some general information about Nevada's counties. They range in population from more than 2 million to just over 1,000. Nevada is one of the most urban states in the United States. Urban is defined by the percentage of the population that lives in urban areas, but in contrast, Nevada also has 6 of the 25 largest counties geographically in the contiguous U.S., as well as some very rural counties and some of the most remote communities in the continental U.S. And 13 of Nevada's 17 counties, interestingly enough, contain more than 75% public lands. That includes our urban counties as well. And these are lands that are not in private ownership, but are managed mostly by the federal government and on which counties provide services. Nevada actually has the most public lands of any state in the continental United States. Some key industries are listed here in our counties, including hospitality and tourism, of course, mining, government, retail, construction, healthcare, agriculture, warehousing, and transportation. Wanted to provide a committee with an overview of all the things that counties do. Much of that many of you are familiar with. But as an introduction to that, I wanted to share something with you that we created this year. And that's a video on what counties do, but also what counties are doing specifically during COVID-19, during the COVID-19 response. So I'm going to play a video for you now.
Hospital workers, EMS responders, contact tracers, and human services providers are some of the frontline heroes of the COVID-19 response. And in Nevada, many of them are county employees. Counties matter, and they serve every Nevadan every day. During COVID-19, Nevada's counties are a critical part of the public health response, supporting health districts, providing regional emergency services, and preparing quarantine and isolation beds. Counties are the provider of the local social safety net. Nevadans most in need rely on counties to provide child protective services, meals to those in need, and services to the homeless and seniors. Nevada's counties are responsible for providing over 20% of the state's Medicaid budget and support public hospitals throughout the state. Counties do all this in addition to providing the everyday municipal and regional services that Nevadans depend on, like roads, parks, water and sewer systems, community centers, libraries, and county airports. Counties also administer elections, helping to ensure one of our most sacred democratic rights. Nevada's counties matter, and in difficult economic times, county services are more important than ever and more in demand. We thank the nearly 23,000 Nevadans that are county employees. We are counties. We are Nevada.
So we wanted to share that with you. Can you all see my PowerPoint again now? Okay, we wanted to share that with you. We're proud of that video. We had county employees from across the state and county commissioners participate in that. And we wanted to share all the things that counties were doing during COVID, but also as a thanks to all the county employees who are on the front lines. Throughout COVID, counties have provided much of the local and on the ground response to COVID-19, including, as you saw in the video, helping to stand up contact tracing and testing. Some counties have paid for tests or additional lab equipment, but all counties have assisted in some capacity and are assisting with or administering or coordinating testing. Also, this video was made prior to the release of the vaccine. And so we also wanted to note that counties are playing a key role in vaccine distribution. Much of that role is the reliance on local emergency response for coordination and distribution. During every crisis or emergency, counties coordinate the local emergency response. They work with the state and, of course, cities and other local entities. Is my volume all right? I just want to check after that video. Okay, thanks. But it's our regional county emergency response folks that coordinate a lot of what happens on the ground. It's our first responders who have helped distribute vaccines, including helping with shots and standing up pods. And we'll get into who is responsible for public health in Nevada in just a little bit in a moment. So as you can see from this map, all of Nevada is divided up into the 17 counties. So the services that counties provide are to every one of Nevada's residents and to each of your constituents as well. This is one of the reasons that counties have been such a critical part of the COVID response because we're the on-the-ground social safety net provider and because counties collectively provide a number of those frontline regional services. So in addition to all the things I mentioned that counties are doing during COVID, counties also provide senior and human services, libraries in most counties, important infrastructure like roads and water systems, local tax collection, document recording, and counties are also responsible in large part for the local justice system, including district and justice courts, DAs, PDs, and county jails. In addition to regional services, one thing we like to share always is that counties also provide municipal services such as planning and the regulation of development, business licensing, streets and other public infrastructure, parks and rec. And they do this in areas that are outside of cities, areas we refer to as unincorporated county. So geographically, most of Nevada consists of unincorporated county, but there are some urban areas that are unincorporated as well, and where the county provides all the regional as well as the municipal or city services. These areas actually include the Las Vegas Strip, some parts of urbanized Washoe County, Pahrump, and much of the Carson Valley and Douglas County. Carson City is actually our state's only consolidated city and county, meaning that Carson City is also the county and regional service provider. Nevada's counties are also responsible for providing many local services to the poor or indigent. Because of this, Nevada's counties provide a lot of what we refer to as the local social safety net. Two key components that we'd like to note are that counties are an important partner in our state's Medicaid program, and that each county has a human services director who may be responsible for a number of county-funded programs, some of which we've mentioned. Here's a more complete list of county services. Some counties also provide county airports, water and wastewater system. Not every airport in the state, but some. Counties and county treasurers and assessors are responsible for property tax calculation, collection, and distribution. County recorders record and manage all real property deeds and marriage records, along with other important documents. Counties are also responsible for many of the local ordinances that protect the health, safety, and welfare of residents and the enforcement of those. And as you all know, counties conduct our federal, state, and local elections with the help of the Secretary of the State, manage voter registration. So it's counties who own and maintain our voting machines and run polling places, manage those staff and volunteers. Courts, I mentioned that already. Public safety, of course, is very important. Sheriffs, county fire and ambulance, including our 911 systems. And then counties actually own and maintain and pave 75% of all of Nevada's roads. Briefly, just to go back to public health, because this is something we've been asked about more during COVID. Both Clark and Washoe have health districts that are separate entities from their counties, though both counties support those health districts in different ways. Washoe County, for example, is the primary funder of the Washoe County Health District. Carson City has a health authority that performs a lot of the health functions in their county. That's actually a department in their county. And through that, they actually support the three surrounding counties, Lyon, Douglas, and Story, with public health services, especially they've been doing that during COVID. Then for the remainder of the state, public health is provided by the state of Nevada through the Department of Public and Behavioral Health through a partnership with the rural counties. The rural counties each have a county health board and then provide some payment through assessments for the state public health services. Here's a map of some of the services I just mentioned. We put this together and a lot of you already know all of this already, especially on this committee, but this shows sort of who does what in terms of state, local, and the areas where counties partner. And this does vary from county to county, but just to give you a sort of a general idea, and we know this print is small, we did provide this on Nellis for you as well. So counties are able to provide all these services through the following revenues. This is a summary of the top revenue sources for counties. The two most important funding streams for counties are C-tax and property tax. C-tax includes sales taxes as well as other revenues that are distributed through a formula to each county. For most of Nevada's counties, property tax is their primary source of revenue. For our rural counties, net proceeds of minerals are also an important source of revenue. And additional funding sources include local fees for services, licenses, etc. And another important source, another important source, just to go back to this slide real quick, of county revenues for Nevada's rural counties are payments in lieu of taxes, otherwise known as PILs. As I mentioned, Nevada has a high concentration of federal land in almost all of our counties, and counties actually provide important services on public lands and to public lands users, including emergency response, roads, and roads. Unlike private property, though, of course, upon which taxes are assessed to fund local services, federal agencies do not pay taxes. So in lieu of that, they provide some federal dollars to each county to pay for those services. It is often, most of the time, not enough to cover what counties provide, but still an important source of revenue, especially for those rural counties. So a little more on some of these key revenue sources, including who sets the authority and limitations on those taxes. As you all also on this committee are familiar with, Nevada's counties, for the most part, do not have what we call home rule. Instead, Nevada is a Dillon's Law state, meaning that counties can only perform those actions specifically allowed by you, the legislature. So property taxes, for example, it's the legislature that says how much counties can impose and collect. Currently, counties are authorized to collect up to $3.64 for every $100 of assessed valuation on property. And many of Nevada's counties are at that $3.64 cap. You can also see the different sources here that go into C-Tax, which is the largest source of revenue for Carson City, actually, and of course, a critical source of revenue for Clark County. Most importantly, it includes sales taxes, but also some cigarette and liquor taxes and real property transfer tax. So our priorities this legislative session, I know that you all, having served in the legislature for a long time, are familiar with these as well. We always request that counties be a part of the conversation on any policy change that the legislature may make that takes additional local dollars to implement, and discuss whether there are new funding sources provided. So we call those unfunded mandates, and you're all familiar with those. A mandate to provide new or expanded service without any new or associated revenue to pay for those services. We make the same request regarding tax abatements. There are many tax abatements created in state law that actually abate local sales, use, and property taxes. These also could impact county budgets and counties' ability to provide critical services. So it's also important for counties to maintain the ability they currently have to carry out the services and mandates they're responsible for. And then finally, counties always engage with the budget process here at the legislature to watch budgeted assessments to counties from the state and in areas of interest, including health and human services, public safety, and Nevada's cooperative extension program, which is an important program that is funded predominantly by Nevada's counties. Very quickly, these are our bills this session. We are allowed 5 bill draft requests every session, and this session our board requested that we submit 4 of them. First is AB1. Currently, as all of you know, all new legislators are required to take new legislator training administered by LCD. AB1 asks that information on how counties and cities operate be included in that training. So this legislation would ensure that legislators are provided training on the services that counties provide, as well as on county authority and county budgeting. AB2, currently in Nevada law, a qualified individual cannot serve on more than one board whose members are appointed by the governor. However, there are many statewide boards and commissions that require specific expertise, qualifications, representation of certain groups, or even residence requirements. And sometimes few Nevadans have all of those qualifications. And there are instances where individuals willing to serve on a particular body are limited because of existing appointments. This proposal would remove that existing prohibition and allow an individual to serve on more than one governor-appointed board. AB 33 clarifies the process to determine paternity in Nevada state law. Currently, the procedure for determining paternity includes timing of hearings and noticing requirements for parents. This exists in NRS 126, and this bill proposes to take the existing procedure and codify it in NRS 432B. We believe that providing this clarification will ensure that the law is applied consistently, and of course that children don't stay in the system longer than is absolutely necessary. Finally, SB 10, as counties continue to struggle with the effects of the Great Recession on property tax revenue, they are now looking toward another potential reduction in revenues due to the economic fallout from COVID. This bill would make a very minor change to the formula for calculating the caps on our property tax bills to provide more predictability and stability for local governments going forward. This is our office. It's right up the street in a historic home here in Carson City. We're very proud of it. Please come and see us anytime with your masks on, of course. And this is our contact information for myself and for Vincent. And Madam Chair, I would be happy to answer any questions or provide any additional information that you or the committee members would like.
Thank you very much. That was really valuable information. Committee members, does anyone have a question? Hang on, I can't see everybody. Okay. Does anybody have a question? I know they're out there, Ms. Stapleton. I know they're out there because we'll wait until you're gone and then we'll go, we forgot to ask that. I think one thing that I would say is that I really recognize how hard this whole COVID process has been for the counties and the responsibility that they have taken on, and I thank them for that. I know it's been overwhelming in some cases, but thank you to the counties for doing that. All right. Any questions? Going once?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay, Senator Neal, please.
So, Ms. Stapleton, you didn't bring up indigent funds. I know that's by the county too, right?
So, yes, Senator Neal, Dagny Stapleton for the record, through the chair to you. Thanks for the question. So, counties collect a certain portion of revenue and property tax that's dedicated to indigent services. Counties provide certain indigent services, as I mentioned, using those dollars as well as general fund dollars in some instances, of course. And then there's also the fund for hospital care to indigent persons. Those are indigent dollars that come through the hospitals to counties as well as from counties and are managed to leverage Medicaid dollars and to also pay for some Medicaid care for indigent persons. I don't know, I'm happy to provide more information on that fund or some of those human services in general, or perhaps the revenue.
No, that's fine. Madam Chair, quick follow-up. So based on the impact or I guess the relationship between the indigent fund and the property tax, if you were to get like SB 10, what would be the effect of that stabilization measure there in terms of revenue, or I guess really the stability of revenue for the indigency money?
Thank you, Senator Neal. Dagny Stapleton for the record, Madam Chair. Well, the indigent funds that counties rely on are property tax funds. There's a significant portion of other revenues that are also property tax revenues. So the indigent funds are a piece of that. And so all of those property tax revenues that counties receive would be impacted, and the stability would be increased by SB 10 if SB 10 were passed.
Madam Chair.
Please. Did I catch the last end? Did you say thank you, or did you have another question?
No, thank you. I'm done.
Do you want more detail?
Thank you. So following up on your NACO bills, I do have a clarifying question without too much conversation. Can you go back to AB 33 and tell me what that was about again? I heard you say taking that out of NRS 126 and codifying it in, but could you give me a little more explanation?
Thanks so much, Madam Chair. Chair Don Darrell-Loop, Dagny Stapleton for the record. So there's a process for determining paternity for kids in the child welfare system, especially as they are, well, specifically when they are leaving that system for adoption proceedings. And currently, well, this matters to counties, of course, because counties provide child protective services, county DAs and public defenders and the courts, counties are involved with all of those systems. And so currently the process for determining paternity, there's things that are codified in statute, such as hearings, noticing for any biological parents that might be out there, as well as testing, DNA testing, and all of that is codified in NRS 126. However, NRS 432B is the portion of law, the chapter that deals with child welfare. And so the bill simply wants to, seeks to codify that process into the child welfare statute so that it's there and that the process is clear and uniform across the state.
Thank you very much. That helps. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Any additional questions from the committee or NACO? All right. Seeing none, I thank you very much. I know that we'll see you back in the committee. And I appreciate this information, and I appreciate the color key handout that you gave us of the state of Nevada with the service providers. I think that was helpful. So appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much, Chair Dondero.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. So hearing no more questions, we'll move on to our next presentation from the Office of Labor Commissioner with the Department of Business and Industry. And Shannon Chambers, our Labor Commissioner, is going to present. So please proceed when you're ready. And it's nice to see you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Thank you again for inviting me. For the record, Shannon Chambers, Nevada Labor Commissioner. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. So the Labor Commissioner and I'm going to kind of touch on some big areas that we enforce, and one of those is Public Works and Prevailing Wage, and I'll also talk about the Apprenticeship Utilization Act, which I know is of interest to some of the members on your committee, but I want to kind of start out and just give you a big overview of the Office of the Labor Commissioner and what we do and kind of where we're going, and also what we've done during the COVID-19 public health emergency. So the Office of the Labor Commissioner is the principal wage and hour and labor regulatory agency for the state of Nevada. Some of our main areas, again, Public Works, Prevailing Wage, Apprenticeship Utilization Act. We also have the responsibility of enforcing minimum wage and ensuring that overtime is paid to employees in the state of Nevada. We have 20 total staff throughout the entire state, 9 investigators for the entire state of Nevada. So all those areas, we have to use those 9 investigators to enforce all the different laws that we are charged with enforcing. We are small. Just for your own knowledge, the 20 total staff is the exact same number that was back in 1999. So that'll give you some perspective. We are 100% federally funded, so obviously that comes into play when you're talking about funding positions and adding positions, and obviously we know the budget situation going into this session, so the Labor Commissioner has not asked for any new positions. In case that is a question, we have not. Obviously, we are being very cautious with our budget and have been, quite frankly, since I've been the Labor Commissioner since 2014. So again, major responsibilities, private sector employment, ensuring minimum wage, overtime, a lot of different employment practices. We also now enforce the paid leave bill in the state of Nevada that passed during last session. We also enforce the laws on public works projects, ensure that prevailing wage is paid on those projects, and then we are now responsible for the Apprenticeship Utilization Act. We also regulate private employment agencies. So these are like your temporary agencies, your Manpower, your Labor Max. We actually license them just for the committee's knowledge. And I know Senator Neal sits on that committee. Senate Bill 55, which will be heard in work session this Wednesday, is going to propose to move what are called employee leasing agencies under the jurisdiction of the Labor Commissioner. So we'll have to see what happens on Wednesday with that bill. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but just to kind of give you an overview of all the statutes that we are charged with enforcing. So there's quite a few of them here. I will point out that Nevada Revised Statute Section 610, which is apprenticeship, and the State Apprenticeship Council, that was moved to the Governor's Office of Workforce Innovation in 2017. There is a proposal now to move the State Apprenticeship Council to the Department of Employment Training and Rehabilitation, so over to Dieter. So that is in play again. There are conversations for the committee of potentially not moving it to Owen and moving the State Apprenticeship Council back to the Labor Commissioner because of the tie-in with Public Works projects, and then obviously with the tie-in for the Apprenticeship Utilization Act. So I'll go over these very quickly, but just some kind of unique elements of Nevada's minimum wage. We have what's called the two-tier system. So if an employer offers qualified health insurance, they can pay the lower rate. If they don't offer qualified health insurance, they have to pay the higher rate. And just to make it clear, the employer just has to offer. In 2016, the Nevada Supreme Court issued a decision in it was called the Hancock case. And in that case, the plaintiffs were trying to make the case that in order to pay that lower rate, you actually had to provide the health insurance. You couldn't just offer it. The Supreme Court decided that issue and said all you had to do was offer it. Senate Bill 192 during the last legislative session specified exactly what qualified health insurance had to be. So that was kind of a new requirement that clarified that issue. In Nevada, too, you cannot use tips to offset the minimum wage. So that is different than federal law, and it is different from some of the other states. Assembly Bill 456 that passed during the last session actually raised the minimum wage in the state of Nevada. It also eliminated some of the exemptions that were in the statute 608.250. So the only exemptions to minimum wage now in the state of Nevada are workers under the age of 18, workers employed by a nonprofit for after school or summer employment, or trainees. There is also the collective bargain exemption. So if there's a collective bargaining agreement, there is an exemption for that. Typically, collective bargaining agreements, the wages are higher than the minimum wage anyway, so that's not an issue that really becomes a problem for the Nevada Labor Commissioner in enforcing those exemptions. So just to kind of give you a picture of what Assembly Bill 456 did during last session, this is how the minimum wage rates will go up in the state of Nevada and how they will go up. So every April 1st of each year, the Labor Commissioner issues a minimum wage bulletin. We also issue an overtime bulletin that goes out to all employers, advising them that the minimum wage will go up effective July 1st of each year. So on this topic, the Labor Commissioner is obviously watching what's going to happen on the federal side. The Biden administration has proposed the idea of increasing the federal minimum wage. The figure that's being thrown around is $15 an hour. So to the extent that that was able to get through and become the federal law, the Labor Commissioner, and based on the Nevada Constitution, would have to have a discussion with the Nevada Legislature and the governor and determine that because that federal rate is higher, that $15 could potentially become the new minimum wage rate in the state of Nevada. Obviously, we're going to watch that and see where that goes. But these amounts here are set forth in statute now, pursuant to Assembly Bill 456. So this is how this rate will go up each and every year. So minimum wage in Nevada also rolls into overtime pay in Nevada. Nevada, again, and I hate to keep using the term unique, but we have a very unique requirement. It's the over 8 hours in a 24-hour period rule. So if you make less than 1.5 times the minimum wage and you work over 8 hours in a 24-hour period, you are now entitled to overtime. So since I've been the Nevada Labor Commissioner since 2014, this is an issue that I've heard about from especially small employers, that if they have only 2 or 3 people working in their shop or their restaurant, that sometimes they can get caught in this over 8-hour rule because they have shift employees. So just to give you perspective, back in 2015, Senate Bill 193 was introduced to try and get rid of the over 8-hour rule. That bill got amended, and it ended up becoming a proposal to raise the minimum wage and ultimately didn't pass. So again, the over 8 hours in a 24-hour period rule is something we sit down with employers, and we will, obviously now that we can't do it in person, we will do it virtually, but to kind of go through different shift work with them so that they don't potentially get caught in that over 8 hour and a 24-hour period rule. If they do, they have to pay overtime, and that's the rule. So the standard rule, federal rule, and similar to other states is if you make more than 1.5 times the minimum wage, you're entitled to overtime for over 40 hours in a week. So that is obviously enforced as well. We do recognize the 410 exemption. So if an employer and employee have an agreement where they're going to work a 410 schedule, that can override the over 8 hour rule, but we make sure that the employer sticks to that schedule and that it's in writing and that the employee knows about that and also agrees to it. So I'm not going to go through each and every single one of these, but just to kind of give you a perspective of the labor laws that we enforce laws relating to deductions. We also require that employers maintain records for 2 years. So employers are only required to keep records in Nevada for 2 years. We also enforce the payment of wages on a semi-monthly basis. We also enforce breaks and lunches, making sure that employees get their breaks based on their hours worked, and also make sure that they get their lunches based on their hours worked. Nevada, too, if an employee is terminated or they're fired, they have to be paid within 3 business days. If they quit, they have to be paid within 7 business days. So I will tell you that during the COVID-19 public health emergency, we have seen more issues with the final paychecks being late, or in some cases getting calls from employers saying, I'm not able to make my payroll today, what should I do? So we work through those cases on a case-by-case basis, but I just want the committee to know that those issues have certainly come up with the COVID-19 public health situation. So we also are required to have required postings for employers, and each and every session we get at least 1 or 2 new ones. So last session, the paid leave bill, Senate Bill 312, that was the new one from last session. And then the other ones listed here are different laws that were passed during the legislature that we now have a requirement to provide these postings for employers, and these are all on our website. We also do publish a lot of different guides for employers, so that's also something we do, and we also do a lot of outreach to try and make sure that employers and employees know about all of these different laws and what's passed. So, overview of public works and prevailing wage laws and the Apprenticeship Utilization Act. This is typically where this would fall under the Government Affairs Committee, and I've appeared before the Government Affairs Committee on both sides to talk about these issues. And since I've been the Labor Commissioner, these are always topics that are seem to be ripe for discussion and ripe for potential legislation and ripe for potential changes. So the Labor Commissioner is ready to engage in those conversations as we go forward. So just to kind of give you a summary of how public works laws work and what we enforce. So every project in the state of Nevada now, a public works project that is over $100,000, the awarding body has to get what they call a public works project number. That is set forth in the law. They have to get that from the Labor Commissioner. I will note for the committee that the $100,000 amount was changed last session with Assembly Bill 136. Previously, it was $250,000, and that came from changes during 2015. So it is now back to 100. So any project over 100 with public funds, they get the Public Works project number. The awarding body then has to determine if they're going to seek a waiver from the Apprenticeship Utilization Act. They then decide, are we going to actually build this project? Is it going to be delayed? Or are we going to cancel it? And I will tell you that during the time of COVID-19, the good news is that we have seen very few projects that have been canceled or delayed. So on this side of things, the public works projects are still going forward and are still being built, which is good news. Obviously, with the $100,000 amount, we are expecting probably over 1,000 public works project numbers to be issued this fiscal year. Just for perspective, last fiscal year, we issued over 850 public works project numbers. So again, expecting that number to continue. So the awarding body or the public body is kind of the language. They then bid the project. They have to use whatever prevailing wage rates are in effect at that time to open the bids. They then open the bids, the project gets awarded, prevailing wages get paid, and how that's monitored is through the certified payroll reports. So every contractor and subcontractor working on a public works project has to certify that they are paying the correct prevailing wage rate. Those certified payroll reports are reviewed by the awarding body and the public body, and that is in the law. So the labor commissioner certainly has a role in the bigger oversight of public works projects, but the day-to-day construction and the day-to-day review is basically the awarding body and the public body's responsibility. So depending upon what happens on that project, if the contractor, subcontractor is potentially not paying the correct prevailing wage rate, or if they're misclassifying employees, we then potentially get into investigations and complaints. They don't delay a project from going on. They just may make it more complicated at the end, because if there's an investigation and there's a finding that the laws were not followed, then the labor commissioner is going to get involved, and we're going to issue a potential decision or a determination, and then that impacts potentially the closeout of that project, but it doesn't impact the actual construction of the project. So if the project is built and everything goes fine, we get a notice of completion and we close out the project. So in my experience as the labor commissioner, I want to tell you that in my opinion, it's 90 to 95% of these projects go just fine. The project gets built, the workers get paid correctly, and everything's fine. It's that 10 to 5% where things can potentially go wrong, and that's where the role of the Labor Commission to oversee the bigger enforcement of these laws takes effect. So general responsibilities of the contractors, again, they have to bid the project correctly. They have to make sure they're paying the correct wages. For general contractors, they also have to provide a list of all their subcontractors on the project. And for the general or prime contractors that are on public works projects, they have kind of an additional responsibility in that if a subcontractor does not pay the correct wages, they can potentially be liable for those wages. And I can tell you that we have had some really, really bad situations where a really good general contractor had a really bad subcontractor, and the subcontractor didn't follow the law, and the general contractor ended up paying wages and back wages and penalties. So we really try to emphasize to the contractors, especially the general contractors, make sure you're monitoring your subcontractors. In Nevada law, outside of public works and prevailing wage, an original contractor is still liable for wages for their subcontractor. So this is pretty consistent with general law, but it's also a requirement within prevailing wage and public works laws. So prevailing wage, the labor commissioner used to calculate it every year, and we used to do it county by county by county. In 2019, Senate Bill 493 was passed, and the goal behind that bill was to kind of break out the urban regions in the state versus the non-urban regions. So what ended up happening was we now have two urban regions, Clark County and Washoe County. We then have a northern rural region and then a southern rural region that lumps all those counties except Clark and Washoe together, north and south. We calculate the prevailing wage rate now every other year, so not every year. So this was a change that happened during the last session. We will calculate the prevailing wage rate again in 2021, so this year. So that was kind of a new thing. The 90% rate on school projects, and people still talk about that, that was eliminated with Assembly Bill 136. The other thing that Assembly Bill 136 did is it lumped in charter schools now as part of public works laws. So any charter school that has public funding that's over $100,000 in terms of construction is now subject to public works and prevailing wage laws. There was also an adjustment for projects that go over 36 months. That's extremely rare, just so you all know. But the intent behind this was if you had a long-term project where it did go over 36 months, then the labor commissioner could ask the awarding body to go back and say, you need to adjust your rates because they're either too low or potentially they're too high for the actual prevailing wage rates that are actually in effect at that time. So who must be paid the prevailing wage rate? So it's anybody who's employed at the site of the project, who's necessary to the project, and essentially is working on the site of the public work. So the labor commissioner has a case right now that is actually in the Nevada Supreme Court, where we had a contractor who moved work off the site of the public work and did not pay prevailing wage. And we found that and did an investigation and issued a determination and had a hearing and found that they violated prevailing wage laws. So this issue could potentially require maybe some potential legislative action depending upon when that case gets decided. But the theory behind this is if a contractor specifically sets up, and the law says a tool yard, job headquarters, batch plant, borrow pit, that is established specifically for that public works project, you have to pay prevailing wage at that location. So we enforce that, and we're going to have to see how this case turns out. But again, that could potentially require some clarification going forward, and it may not be decided. That case may not be decided before the session ends. So again, the regions now, the hourly and daily wage rates have to be set for that county. So Clark County, Washoe County, Northern Rural, Southern Rural. Prevailing wage also applies to contract and temporary employees. It also does apply to workers who essentially maybe are what they call employee leased. So the employees are leased. But if they are performing work that's necessary for the public works project, they have to be paid the prevailing wage rate. I'll talk about apprentices here in a minute because it ties into the Apprenticeship Utilization Act. So the other thing that happened in 2019 was Assembly Bill 190 implemented a definition of what is a bona fide fringe benefit. In Nevada, under prevailing wage laws, a contractor can claim a fringe benefit off of the hourly rate. So what was happening, unfortunately, was subcontractors were claiming, for example, let's say the hourly rate was $40 and they would claim a bona fide fringe benefit of $10. And then the labor commissioner would get a complaint saying, you know, I had $10 taken off of my paycheck. I'm not getting health insurance. I'm not getting retirement. I'm not getting, quote unquote, these fringe benefits. So Assembly Bill 190 was an attempt to clarify what is a bona fide fringe benefit, how they have to be paid, and basically that they have to be for the sole benefit of the worker. Bona fide fringe benefits also have to be annualized. So what that means is they have to be taken consistently for each pay period or each paycheck. They can't just be a one-time thing. So Assembly Bill 190 attempted to do that, and we've been enforcing that since July 1st of 2019. So apprentices are an exemption to prevailing wage laws because they're apprentices. So the State Apprenticeship Council sets apprenticeship rates for apprentices on public works project. The Labor Commissioner has no authority over that. The Labor Commissioner also has no authority over the registration of apprentices or the registration of apprenticeship programs. However, what we do verify is if an apprentice is reported on a certified payroll report, we make sure that there's proper documentation that verifies exactly that that apprentice is registered with the State Apprenticeship Council. So I just mentioned that because with the Apprenticeship Utilization Act, everybody thinks the Labor Commissioner controls the actual registration of apprentices or registration of apprenticeship programs. We do not. That is with the State Apprenticeship Council, which is right now with the Governor's Office of Workforce Innovation. Design professionals are also an exemption. I'm not going to really get into this because these are typically people who are working on one of these projects, who are performing duties that require a professional license or some type of independent contractor contract, but they are recognized as another exception to prevailing wage. Service providers, so I will mention this. This was kind of a topic during last session. So the Labor Commissioner did an advisory opinion on this, and then a regulation package was actually passed on this. And the best way I can describe this is if there's a public works project going on, and let's say a Sani hut has to be delivered to the project or water has to be delivered to the project, it is the Labor Commissioner's opinion that that is a service provider because they are just dropping off some type of service or some type of product. They're not actually working on the project, and then they leave. So again, that was a discussion during last session and potentially could come up again. There are also different rates for a foreman, a general foreman, and a journeyman. And when the Labor Commissioner publishes the prevailing wage rates, those are all identified in the individual rates for each job classification. So I won't go through each and every step with this, but there is a very specific claim and complaint process that is set forth by law that the Labor Commissioner has to follow. In Nevada, basically anybody can file a complaint with the Labor Commissioner. There are no rules on restrictions on that. So unions can file complaints with the Labor Commissioner, trade associations, employer associations, contractors can file complaints against other contractors, which we get quite frequently. The Labor Commissioner then has the decision to either assign that back to the public body to conduct an investigation, or we can conduct an investigation through our office. We also have the unique ability of imposing administrative penalties against public bodies. So that is unique, and I will tell you that does not go over well, but I will give you an example of a situation where the Labor Commissioner might issue an administrative penalty against a public agency or a public body. So by law, there's the open bid process. We have had awarding bodies award contracts. Every single contract was awarded as a sole source contract because they really liked the contractor or somebody knew the contractor. That is a violation of law. So that may be a situation, and that is a situation where the Labor Commissioner has imposed administrative penalties on an awarding body. So through each step of this, the investigation, the determination, if there's appeals, objections, then in some cases, we will actually go to a hearing. If the parties don't like the decision of the Labor Commissioner, they can obviously appeal that on judicial review, and then potentially it goes to appellate court or Nevada Supreme Court. Knock on everything, since I've been the Labor Commissioner, we've only had 2 cases that have gone up on appeal past the Office of the Labor Commissioner. So we're hoping to keep that up. So Senate Bill 207, the Apprenticeship Utilization Act, and certainly a bill during the last session that had a lot of discussion on all sides and where this was going to go and how it was going to end up. So since I've been the Labor Commissioner, the idea of expanding apprenticeship and apprenticeship utilization has been a topic that I've been engaged in since I've been the Labor Commissioner. At the federal level, and even under the Trump administration, there was a big push to expand apprenticeship throughout the states. They rolled out a lot of what they called apprenticeship expansion grants to try and, again, expand apprenticeship throughout the country and throughout the states. So in terms of public works projects and prevailing wage, what the Apprenticeship Utilization Act did was it essentially said that if you have a project over $100,000, if there are more than 3 workers per craft or type of work performed, so the simplest way I can say this is, for example, if you have more than 3 electricians on a project, if you are working on a horizontal project, so think of a road, 3% of those hours for the electricians has to be worked by an apprentice. If it's vertical construction, so going up, 10% of those hours have to be worked by an apprentice. So the key things to remember here is this is triggered with more than three workers per craft or type of work performed. And that's classification by classification, contractor by contractor, subcontractor by subcontractor. So if you have less than 3, you are not subject to Senate Bill 207 and the Apprenticeship Utilization Act. So during the discussions last session, there were conversations about, well, what if there's not enough apprentices? What if there's not a registered apprenticeship program? Should there be some exemptions to this law? And the Labor Commissioner was involved in those conversations. So the exemptions that the law came up with, essentially, and there's 3 of them, and this is number 6 on the screen that you're looking at right now, is the public or awarding body, and only the public or awarding body can seek a waiver from the Labor Commissioner if, number 1, there's no registered apprenticeship program in that jurisdiction for that craft or type of work performed. And the easiest example here is in the state of Nevada, there are no apprenticeship programs for truck drivers. So the Labor Commissioner has issued a lot of waivers for projects, especially highway projects, for the truck driver job classification, because there are no apprenticeship programs for truckers in the state of Nevada. So that would certainly qualify for a waiver under number 1. The second basis for a potential waiver is if a contractor or subcontractor submits a request for an apprentice to an apprenticeship program, and that is not acted upon within 5 business days or it's denied, then a waiver can be requested from the Labor Commissioner. And I will tell you, this is happening. There are a lot of projects going on right now, especially in Northern Nevada. And I'll say specifically like Senator Gocachia's district, Elko, there are a lot of projects going on right now, and apprentices are spread very, very thin. So we are seeing a lot of requests for waivers where the apprenticeship program's just saying, we don't have enough apprentices to go around, so we have to deny your request. So the Labor Commissioner can grant a waiver on that basis as well. The third and final one is if the project is uniquely complex or hazardous. I can tell you this doesn't really come up a lot, and we really don't see a lot of requests for waivers based on this reason. But again, if we did, we would evaluate and determine if it's something that meets the law, and the Labor Commissioner can grant a waiver. So you don't need all 3 of these. You just need to pick the one that qualifies for the waiver. In the period covering July 1st, 2020 through the end of last year, the Labor Commissioner granted 154 waivers from the Apprenticeship Utilization Act. Not a single one of those was appealed on any side, so we think that's a good result. I will also tell you that we worked extremely hard with the contractors and with the awarding bodies and public bodies to try and make this bill and the implementation of this bill as easy as possible. We set up a whole link on our website specifically for the Apprenticeship Utilization Act, all the forms, all the documents. Pre-COVID, we were doing a lot of training on this, and we still do a lot of training on it. But the Labor Commissioner certainly understands that there are some contractors and some individuals that are not overly thrilled with this bill, and certainly understand that. But we really have tried to implement this bill to the best of our ability and make it efficient and make it practical. And the waivers, I'm issuing those, obviously myself. We're trying to turn those around within 24 to 48 hours at the latest. Because as the labor commissioner, I never wanted to hear that projects were being held up or problems because the labor commissioner wouldn't issue a waiver. So again, certainly understand there's different views on all sides, but this is the law that the labor commissioner is tasked with implementing and enforcing, and we are enforcing it. And I will tell you that we are seeing violations of the Apprenticeship Utilization Act. There are some contractors that are not making a good faith effort to comply with this law. And then obviously that goes through potentially an investigation and a determination process. But again, overall, in the opinion of the labor commissioner, this bill is doing what it set out to do. It is increasing apprenticeship utilization on public works projects. So again, happy to have further conversations about this and this topic as we go through the session. So I'll kind of run through these pretty quickly. So the labor commissioner, obviously, COVID-19 has a big impact on labor issues, the workforce, employers, employees. So we started issuing guidance and questions and frequently asked questions last March, so March of 2020. And these are just some of the main ones. So we did issue a reminder about Nevada labor laws. So as soon as the COVID-19 public health emergency was declared, some of the first questions I got was, Nevada labor commissioner, can't you overturn the raise in the minimum wage, or can't you make it not go into effect? No, can't do that. We also still had to enforce Nevada labor laws. There was nothing in that public health emergency that said don't enforce Nevada labor laws. So we issued a reminder on this. Now, I will say, obviously, because some businesses were open, then they were shut, then they were open again, we obviously have the discretion to extend timelines to respond to claims or complaints, and we do that on a case-by-case basis and have kind of built that into the system. But just a reminder that Nevada labor laws are still being enforced, and that was a good reminder, unfortunately, for some employers. We also issued a telework guide because telework for some employees and some employers became the norm. And believe it or not, we started getting complaints and claims about telework and when I log in and I'm not being paid for logging in and different things like that. So we issued some guidance about telework. Again, happy we did that because for some employees and employers, this is still the norm. So we still enforce Nevada labor laws if an individual is teleworking. So this one came up, I would say probably around July, August of last year as businesses started to open back up. We started to see employers ask employees to sign agreements, basically agreeing that they would not sue the employer if they were potentially exposed to COVID-19 or ended up getting COVID-19. So the labor commissioner issued some guidance on this. And the one that I'll just emphasize here is Nevada law specifically says that you cannot ask an employee to waive their rights to workers' compensation. So that is in Nevada law. But again, just a good reminder for employers that this potentially is not legal. And if you're going to do this, these are the things you need to think about and obviously deal with. And again, even if you get an employee to sign a release, it may not be valid in a court of law. And, potentially out of the COVID-19 public health emergency, we may see some litigation and some case law on this as these things go forward. So the final one that we issued, and this just came out recently, was some guidance about vaccines and leave for vaccinations. So kind of coming full circle to all of this is the first phase was, basically businesses shutting down. Now it's businesses opening back up and employees and employers at the same time getting access to the vaccine and potentially making it a requirement. So we issued this guidance a couple weeks ago because this started to become an issue. So the labor commissioner has issued some guidance on this. Obviously going to have to see what the federal government does as well, and we'll continue to watch this issue as well. So with that, Madam Chair, that is kind of the end of my presentation. I know it's a lot. The Labor Commissioner has a lot of different areas, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. That was a ton of really important information. Committee questions.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Senator Hansen.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Commissioner, that was actually an excellent presentation. As a contractor, I've had to have some issues dealt with you guys. You do a fantastic job. I've always found the Labor Commissioner's office to be really responsive in every respect. We've had issues on filling out our prevailing wage report forms and all that, and you've been exceptionally helpful. And I think your overall focus is absolutely excellent. So I just want to compliment you. I think you guys, from the contractor's perspective, do a really first-class job and really try to balance, make things fair for everybody. The one question I've got is actually the 410s, where you do 4 10-hour days. Yeah, that was a big issue back 5 sessions ago when we were having our economic crisis, 2011 session. I'm just curious. At the time, it sounded like a great idea. And, everybody gets basically a 3-day weekend every time, and you do work 4 days. Has that taken off at all? I mean, how often do you even run into that? Is it common at all in Nevada?
So again, Shannon Chambers for the record, Nevada Labor Commissioner. Madam Chair, through you to Senator Hansen. So I will tell you, it has taken off, especially on the construction side. The 410s has taken off big time. Now, we are seeing with the impacts of COVID-19, we're starting to see more 410s. We've also seen employers ask me, can I do a 312? Again, back to your point about the balance, I'm not going to say no as the Labor Commissioner if that works for an employer and an employee. I mean, my point is have it in writing and make sure that they're paid for all hours worked. Where we see the 410s go wrong is if you don't stick to it. So that's easier to do on a construction project, as you know, where, you can be out there for 10 hours a day working, and that goes by like that. So we really, we balance when people ask us, can I do a 410? Can I break the 410? We'll say you can, and you both say you can do it, but just stick to it. And I say that over and over and over, but it has taken off. I will tell you, it has taken off.
That's interesting. Well, thank you. I enjoyed your presentation very much. So keep up the good work. And Madam Chair, thank you for letting me ask the questions.
You are more than welcome. We will go to Senator Neal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Chambers, I wanted to ask about AB 132. I thought you had put out guidance for that. I didn't see it in your presentation.
So again, Shannon Chambers, Nevada Labor Commissioner for the record, and Madam Chair, through you to Senator Neal. So we do have guidance on it, Senator Neal. It's not a required posting because that was not in the final bill. Right. But we do have guidance on it, and I kind of thought you'd ask me about that bill. We have had some complaints on that, and I will tell you, we've done investigations, and we've had some successful results on that bill and exactly you were trying to do. And I'm happy to send you some of those cases, and I'll send you the guidance as well.
Definitely. Thank you for that. And then also my second question is, do you remember Assemblyman Hogan? He had AB 281. It passed in 2013. Are you responsible for the implementation of his bill? It mostly falls squarely under 338, and it was around the reporting of the demographics of workers.
So again, Shannon Chambers, Nevada Labor Commissioner for the record, Madam Chair, through you to Senator Neal. So we don't enforce that on the day-to-day basis, Senator Neal. That's enforced through the certified payroll reports. That's enforced by the awarding bodies. So it's Nevada Revised Statute Section 338.070, and they do report the demographics, the ethnicity, the gender. Some of them actually still, we tried to tell them not to do that. They still report the social security number, but that's really enforced at the awarding body level. Now, I would tell you this, if that is not being collected and we received a complaint, we would then treat that under the jurisdiction of the labor commissioner for failing to comply with the certified payroll report laws.
Okay. And then my final question is around the 8-hour rule and telework. Have there been any kind of issues around telework and the overtime, I guess, failure to pay overtime, and they happen to be in a telework mode?
So again, for the record, Shannon Chambers, Nevada Labor Commissioner, Madam Chair, through you to Senator Neal. Yes, we have received complaints on that specific issue. And it is my view that there may need to be maybe some potential regulatory changes on that going forward. The issue that we're seeing is the employees logging in, like the employer will tell them to log in at, say, 8 a.m. And then they actually supposedly don't start work until 10. And I'm just using this as an example. And then they don't log off until, say, 6 or 7 at night. And then they're asked again to log back in at 8. So we've had some definite claims and complaints and investigations of when the employer tells you to log in, but you're just logged in, and really, I mean, the employer would say, well, they're not working. And we say, well, you told them to log in. So we are definitely seeing that issue. And I think as telework really becomes the norm, again, the labor commissioner may need to provide some more guidance on that issue and maybe some potential regulatory changes down the road.
Yeah, thank you for that. Because I was super wondering, because I know I was looking at legislation around telework, trying to put some parameters around it now that it was growing. But I was wondering what was happening with teachers, because the day is not a traditional 7-hour day. It runs well over, because students and parents, it's just out of bounds, right? So I was just wondering what was happening.
Thank you very much. And I would just editorialize there, that's nothing new with teachers. We've always taken papers home to grade and done things outside of our regular day. Additional questions? Vice Chair Orenshaw, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Dondero Loop. Thank you, Commissioner, for the presentation. My question has to do with a couple of things. I was wondering if you had a ballpark idea of how many Nevadans with intellectual and developmental disabilities are employed in training programs where they're earning a sub minimum wage or below minimum wage. And I wondered also if you could kind of talk about how what we do in Nevada compares to other states or maybe our neighboring states with folks in those training programs. Thank you.
So again, Shannon Chambers, Nevada Labor Commissioner, for the record, Madam Chair, through you to Senator Orenshaw. So Senator Orenshaw, I'm aware of that issue. We don't track that data. That is actually tracked by the Department of Employment Training and Rehabilitation. And I can try and find out exactly who's tracking that over there for you and get that to you. But I'm aware of the issue, and I'm sure, as you're aware, last session there was discussion about potentially changing that wage that was paid to that group that you just described. So we don't track it, and we don't have jurisdiction over it, but I can certainly point you in the right direction and get you a name over there the best I can.
I appreciate. Thank you, Chair Dondero Loop.
Okay, thank you very much. Any additional questions from the committee?
Madam Chair, I just have one more. I forgot.
Sure, go ahead.
Question. Ms. Chambers, I wanted to ask about the apprenticeship bill from 2019. Early on in your presentation, you talked about there's internal discussions to shift it from Owen back to Division of Labor, the Labor Commissioner's office. But what I'm super confused about is, are they no longer trying to expand apprenticeships beyond 338? Because I know that the goal was we also have apprenticeships within healthcare and some other areas. And there was a whole workforce leaning where we were trying to expand apprenticeships to speak to different workforce categories so that folks could number one, be prepared. And we were building pipelines for not just public works, but actually several other areas.
So Shannon Chambers, Nevada Labor Commissioner, again for the record, Madam Chair, through you to Senator Neal. So it's my understanding, Senator Neal, that effort since 2017 is still ongoing to expand apprenticeship, not just in construction, but beyond that, to your point, healthcare, some of the new industries. So that is my understanding. That's been going on with Owens since 2017. It's my understanding that would be the goal, to continue that if the State Apprenticeship Council moves to Dieter, or if it moves back to the Labor Commissioner. I can tell you when they did that in 2017, there were people on all sides of that issue too that didn't want it moved. And now again, those are some of the same people that potentially want it back within the Labor Commissioner. But it's my understanding, and I would have to verify that with Owen and their data, but it's my understanding that effort has been ongoing and will continue.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I have one question about the 410s or the 312s. I know that I have heard nurses work 312s. When they work 312s, do they ultimately pay them for 40 hours, or do they just pay them for the 36 that they work?
So Shannon Chambers, Nevada Labor Commissioner for the record. Madam Chair, thank you for the question. So there's kind of two levels to that. So in some of the hospitals, a lot of the nurses and a lot of the staff have collective bargaining agreements. So their wages are basically governed by the collective bargaining agreement. We have seen situations where if they work more than, it could be 36 hours during a week, where the employer will pay them the full 40. We have also seen where there's a signed agreement that they work the 312s, they make more than 1.5 times the minimum wage, they're only paid for the 36 hours. So it really just depends on the institution, and then if there's a collective bargaining agreement.
Okay, thank you. That's kind of what I was processing, so I appreciate that information. Additional questions, committee? Well, thank you, Labor Commissioner. That was a lot of information, and we appreciate you being with us here today. Hearing no more questions, we'll move on, and we will go to public comment. So we'll wait just a minute for broadcasting to get that together, and we'll move into public comment. And while we're waiting for broadcasting, please remember to state and spell your name and limit your comments to 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. Your public line is currently open and working, and you have no callers at this time.
Okay, we will do the teacher pause for just a minute to make sure. And if hearing no more public comment, that concludes our meeting today. We'll be meeting again on Wednesday at 3:30. That will be February 17th, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for attending, and we'll see you soon. Have a nice evening.